I was using a low-hanging fruit, for example, being the restaurant industry, where we're seeing that in South Africa currently, the restaurant industry, predominantly, most of the people that are hired there are people that are either documented or not documented, non-South Africans. And a lot of the South Africans...
where do you get that statistic? What's your source?
Well, the last time even, I've had the the Department of Home Affairs was here. I've had callers who have been listeners who work within the industry who said, Faith, unfortunately, I work within the
people within the industry. Let me tell you.
People that work in the industry who
so the labor department would have been your go-to area. So what's interesting about South Africa is that majority of industries, they've got less than 10 dominating companies, whether it's mining, whether it's security, whether it's the restaurant, and so on, hospitality. And when you think about the restaurants, let's go to the big restaurants. Now, what are the big restaurants? KFC, Nando's. That's where the huge employees are. They account for more than 85% of the labor that is working in that space. The foreign nationals are hired in boutique restaurants. There's one restaurant in Sandton that sells food very expensively. But even if you go there, there'll be like 30% of the staff. We've had this exercise. We went. The president of the EFF went, spoke to those people. Most of the time he came across, and all of them would be boutique hotels. It's very difficult for KFC, Nando's, Steers, Debonair's, and so on and so forth. In those restaurants, it's almost 100% South Africans. Where do you find these foreign nationals? And not majority, it's difficult for them to work in that space because the restaurants are heavily regulated without being documented. It's boutique hotels, and they account for a very little labor force. Let me go directly to the problem people have with the EFF, is people going around thinking when we take over power tomorrow, we're going to open the borders.
And say everybody come to South Africa.
And say from Egypt, from Cape to Cairo, come to South Africa. That's not true. That is a fundamental misrepresentation of an important macroeconomic question. So regional integration. You will never be able to build an economy if you are not concerned about your neighbor. We're told by the scientists that the water deposits there can feed the over 1 billion population of the continent for 300 years if it didn't rain for 300 years. But economically, if you're going to open factories and become productive, you cannot go and sell those products that you're producing in South Africa to make real economic growth. You won't sell them in China because Chinese markets are saturated, Europe or India. The untapped market is the continent. Those are consumers, 1.2 billion of them. Your consumers. If you do not develop in a way that regionally integrates, you will always have a person at the border trying to enter. And it's short-termism, it's short-term thinking. But it keeps us concentrated on the clams. I kept saying this to you. You're not talking about the big fish. The big fish is the mines. Those zamazamas are operating in mines that have been abandoned by the bigger exploitative class. 70% of the world's gold comes from South Africa, but it does not benefit any South Africans. We don't care who you are. We're not scared. We don't care. When you commit crime, the EFF government will be a crime-busting government. We're not going to allow anybody to abuse the generosity of the South African spirit. We'll never allow that. Whether you're Nigerian, Pakistani or not, if you bring nonsense to South Africa, we're not even going to deport you. We're going to imprison you, and if it needs be for good. So we'll be very tough on crime. But the regional integration is a much longer process, but it has to do with trade deals that allow us to get the resources that we need from our neighbors in exchange for economic activities. And those economic activities are going to benefit South Africans first.
Black South Africans are going to say to you, we hear you, but in often cases the messaging of the economic freedom fighters gets lost in the putting South Africans first narrative. So how then do you respond to the call by South Africans, or many South Africans, and I'm sure once we open up the lines, they will speak to you about this, where they say that for a long time we've been excluded from economic participation and from taking the crumbs from a white oppressive government to now an oppressive, or in certain instances, a government that did not fulfill all of its promises within the 30 years of governing. And now we've got an issue here of illegal foreign nationals that are threatening to take away jobs. And you know this, it's been a song that has been sung time and time again, where South Africans are saying, we hear you, but what is it that the EFF is going to do to make sure that South Africans are put first when it comes to economic inclusivity, so that, as you're saying, that we don't refer to townships anymore, but we also don't have little kids dying from eating biscuits in Spaza shops in Soweto, and you don't have illegal foreign nationals who are, some are murdering people, where you don't have the West End, we're talking about crime, where you don't have the West End that is inundated with illegal miners who are coming in the West End from Mozambique, from Lesotho, and other places as well, Malawi, Zimbabwe, who are coming in and are threatening the communities of the West End, where South Africans are saying, enough now, we are living in fear. How then do you start addressing that from putting South Africans first and the national agenda of the Republic?
There's a lot of convolution there that we must disarticulate very quickly. Unemployment in South Africa has been chronic since the 1980s, because South Africa's economy has been deindustrializing, and there's been an over-financialization. That's fact number one. We must not lie. Let's not mislead our people. Let's not have a misdiagnosis, because you won't solve the problems. Even if you build the highest walls, you don't create jobs. You're not creating jobs. There are no jobs. Unemployment, just this week, Stats SA actually last week indicated that it has increased. This economy is not creating jobs. Why do we lie? Why do we lie to each other that there are these jobs that are being created and these jobs are going somewhere and not to the South Africans? The truth of the matter is, since the late 1980s, it's there on the Stats SA trajectory. There has not been jobs. Now, that is separate to the problem of undocumentation. The EFF has never said there must never be a documentation of people. We've never said that, because that will be irresponsible. How would you govern if you do not know who is in the country? That's a function of government. Government has failed to administer migration. It has failed to administer a whole set of activities, including clinics, including schools. That's a failure of the South African government. The tuck shops. Now, do you know, even in the most distant rural areas, big brands like Boxer, ShopRite sell expired food. There's been those instances. And that's again a failure of regulation. Government must regulate. Must not only regulate in Sandton that the food outlets in Sandton are not selling food that is expired. You must regulate everywhere, whether a person is Pakistani, whether a person is South African or not. The tuck shops in Soweto, I don't know if you've been to Soweto, they're not owned by foreign nationals. Those people are tenants. All of them, those Pakistanis, those Somalis are tenants. Sowetans are in business. They're hiring out garages. They get 3,500, 6,000 rand a month, hiring out to a person that is not South African. And then most of those people, if you must go, some people tried to go and look at them. Most of them are documented. But they're hired out. Unogokwe Soweto mixes their pension fund with the money they are making out of hiring a garage out in order to eke a living. Those Spaza shops are more aggressive than it has ever been. They are literally in every street. But they don't own the land. They are tenants. You say to Sowetans, let's chase these people out. They're going to lose that income with immediate effect. So I'm saying that we must not convolute things. An industrial economy has to be executed through a macroeconomic plan. If we're going to create jobs, Faith, we have to have a conversation about the fact that the businesses, the big businesses in South Africa, particularly the banks, keep a lot of money in the bank. They don't reinvest it in productive sectors. They don't build factories. They don't build industries because they don't trust the South African example. Since 1994, they want to keep it there so that when they think that they are panicking, they just move it to Dubai or to the economic havens in the world. That's where our problem is. Number two, with the over 2 trillion rands that the government spends every day, budgets every day, it is looted by tenderpreneurs where services don't arrive to our people. And we're saying there, with infrastructure development and service delivery, you've got sustainable jobs that you can create. Do away with the tenders. Don't give people EPWPs. Hire them on a permanent contract, on secure jobs. You're going to create jobs.
Yes, and I'm going to make reference to that and build on from what you're saying there. Gauteng Premier currently, Panyaza Lesufi, obviously has got the intention of maintaining his governance over the Gauteng province, and hence you've seen the introduction of Amapanyaza, or the wardens. You've got issues around introduction of Nasispani, as well as looking at rehabilitating or fixing the current infrastructure when it comes to electricity supply. So you've got here an ANC incumbent that is set on maintaining the position of Gauteng Premiership and seeing and being able to, because I've seen some of the work that has also been doing, as you've been also privy to, you know, when you call young people, you say, I'm now going to give you skills development, I'm going to give you skills development and training. You're saying that is not being done in good faith and with good intention. That is going to end after the 30th of May?
Absolutely, because Nasispani is in-service training. It's not jobs. It's in-service training. It's actually very clear. They say that. There's no intention with regards to that for the maintenance of those jobs. The wardens, we're going to integrate them into the police. Why are they a separate entity? You've got to strengthen the policing of South Africa with proper training that the police academy provides. It should have been done like that from the beginning. Should have allocated that budget to the SAPs. Have aggressive training for the type of violence that we experience on the streets. But because he was electioneering, he didn't think it through. You may, under the EFF government, sustain wardens. But the rest of the Nasispani arrangement, by the way, he promised 500,000 jobs. He has not given more than 100,000. But they are in-service trainings. That's why they use the word opportunity. It's not a job. It's a job opportunity. Meaning you have an opportunity after that training to can or not get a job. I'm saying to you, we've got to all wake up. 30 years these people have had. 30 years. Do you know there are people who were born in 1994 who have never worked? So the truth of the matter is they've always had a glorified EPWP program that comes out in a corrupt way, short-term contracts, low-paid, super exploitation. How do we know that the economy, how do we know that the government is now providing real jobs? Is if it shifts, as I indicated, into two aspects. One, building internal state capacity to provide services. Don't give money to the tenderpreneurs. Hire people directly. Pay them sustainable salaries with benefits so that they are able to provide services. Those services will arrive. Nobody will damage infrastructure because they won't get anything since you don't have tenders. Secondly, you've got to open factories in relation to the productive aspects of it. You have to produce the goods and services that the people consume in South Africa. So much so that you even provide to the rest of the continent, since the African continent doesn't have